If you're a motorsport fan, you don't have to look far on social media to find clips of BTCC from the 90s when it was run under super touring rules. There was some fantastic racing, and for those of us of a certain age remember Murray Walker screaming out the commentary weekend in, weekend out. But what happened to those drivers that Murray was shouting about? Did they retire? Did they go on and do other things? And obviously in 2000 the rules changed and a lot of the manufacturers pulled away. So what happened to these drivers at the next stage in their careers? I'm going to tell you about a few of them. I know I'd get absolutely roasted if I didn't include Andy Rouse. Well, I suppose I'll get rousted. No, sorry, that's a terrible joke. Who was a BTCC legend. He was in it in its various formats since 1973. And not only was Andy a fantastic racer, and a lot of people particularly remember him from the Sierra Cosworth days, he was also an incredibly superb engineer and was, you know, prepared cars for many of the works teams. He did stuff with Toyota and Ford and so on. He decided to retire at the end of 1994, and he then carried on running Andy Rouse Engineering, and he was running the works entries of Ford Mondeos in 1995, but they had a bit of an average season, so he actually lost the works contract for 1996. So he turned to Nissan, had a couple of semi-works cars that he ran through 1996, but that only went for a single season. Thereafter, he then pursued a sort of idea of trying to make the touring cars more affordable. Let's remember the end of the 90s, BTC super touring teams, some of them were spending in the region of £10 million a season, and Andy could see this wasn't sustainable, so he was coming up with a Toyota Corolla which was built to super touring rules but provided a more affordable entry level for teams wanting to come into the series. Unfortunately, Toyota didn't really get on board with this. They dragged their heels. I found rumours that it was down to it clashing with their WRC Corolla program, but they eventually did come on board. But unfortunately, by then it appears the project had lost momentum. They did some testing with it, but apparently never got to race due to funding issues. And eventually this car actually got sold to New Zealand and is racing in a series down under. So unfortunately that one didn't work for him, but he then with others came up in the early 2000s with a sort of V8 supercar series, which was, the idea was it'd be based around space frames, normally aspirated V8s, a bit sort of BTCC meets NASCAR, and he managed to get Peugeot and Jaguar on board. And he apparently was in advanced negotiations with the Brands Hatch group of circuits, so people like Alton Park and Snetterton and so on, but unfortunately Brands Hatch circuits got sold out to a company called Optigan, and the momentum in the deal dried up there. So a few cars were built, but it never got as far as a race series. And as far as I can see from that thereafter, Andy has done things like he's restored the Cadillac. And Rouse Sport has gone on to do other things. They've done stuff with GT series and so on, and I think with Brit Car, so they are still out and about there. The interesting thing I did find was that his son Julian, who once worked for Arden Motorsport, the team that was originally created I believe by Christian Horner, him now with Red Bull F1 fame, he actually now works for Alpine F1 as their sporting director. So the motorsport genes definitely run deep in the Rouse family. So next up I've got Steve Soper, who a lot considered to be one of the greatest touring car racers ever. Never did actually win the BTCC Super Touring Championship, and was synonymous with BMW, and in particular remember this great clash between him and John Cleland, which resulted in Steve Soper's teammate Tim Harvey winning the championship. One of the more iconic moments. Now, Steve drove for BMW in the BTCC between 91 and 94. He then went driving for BMW Germany between 95 and 97. And he also competed in the Japan Championship, and he also had sporadic appearances in the Italian Championship. So he was obviously a very busy guy, whizzing around the world in all these various series. He overlapped that between 96 and 99 with some Le Mans appearances. First couple of years were with McLaren, and that, of course, at the time, the McLaren F1, that had a BMW engine, so there was a link there. And then subsequently he entered with the BMW team. Apparently, I believe in 99 he commented how much he really didn't like the Le Mans 24-hour, and from what I can see has never been back. He also entered the Macau race in sort of 95 to 98, so again very big and active with BMW during that period. This came to an end apparently when he had a clash with Gerhard Berger, the former F1 driver, in around about 2000. But in 2001 he actually purchased a BMW dealership at Lincoln in the UK, and has gone on to great success for that, still has it today. And I discovered he won the best BMW dealer in a certain class in 2023, so it's obviously quite a top-notch outlet. Interestingly, in 2001, in quite a surprise, he returned to the BTCC in the Peugeot 406. Obviously, the rules had moved on then to the post-Super Touring regs, and he had quite a bad crash in the last race at Brands Hatch, and due to the injuries, I think it was mainly sort of head injuries, he was advised to retire from motorsport. He did make a return, cleared on medical grounds in 2013, but I haven't found any significant results for him. I guess possibly a bit more of the historic side of things that he's been involved in since then. Next up, I've got New Zealander Paul Radisich. Now, those are great memories. Well, remember, Paul arrived with an absolute bang in one of the Andy Rouse engineering Ford Mondeos in 1993. He arrived mid-season, brand new car, and incredibly finished third in the championship despite only doing half the races. He stayed with Ford right through until the end of 1997, where, having had a couple of seasons finishing I think 13th, he decided it was time for a change. He went over to Peugeot, but without further success, and at that point called quits on his BTCC career. He returned down under, and what do they race down under? Yep, V8 supercars, and these are raced depending on the series across New Zealand and obviously Australia. He raced there from 99 onwards, reasonable amount of success, but in 2008 suffered this really horrible crash at Mount Panorama. As you can see, the car went head on into like an unprotected wall. He suffered quite a lot of injuries. There was broken ankles, sternums, cracked ribs, etc, etc, and apparently his recovery was quite a long journey. He then came back at the beginning of 2015 as team manager for the Super Black Racing team, but this was disbanded at the end of 2016. He then did actually make a racing comeback at the back end of 2019 back in the V8s, Hampton Down in New Zealand. It was, like, I believe, last race of the season. It was just a one-off drive. And since then, sadly, following the death of his father in 2021, he's become managing director of Aegis Oil in New Zealand, and that's what he mainly does now. And he does actually co-host the TV3 programme for BTCC coverage in New Zealand. Scott John Cleland was a long-time racer within the British Touring Car Championship, dating back to 1989 when it was broken down into 4 different classes, right through to 1999 when he retired. He was always synonymous with Vauxhall, which was quite interesting because his day job was actually as a principal for a Volvo dealership in Scotland. After retirement in 1999, he kept his hand in with racing. He drove between 2000 and 2005 in the Bathurst 1000 race over at Mount Panorama in Australia. Actually had a best result of 2nd in 2001, so he was certainly keeping his hand in. And during 2000 he entered parts of the British GT Championship as well. Now, as I mentioned, his day job was with his dealership called, funny enough, Cleland's, up in Galashiels in Scotland, which is one of the longest serving Volvo dealerships up there. But he is actually keeping his hand in a little bit with some historic racing, and has actually purchased one of his old Vauxhall Cavalier race cars to enter in those historic races. So he hasn't gone away quite yet. Will Hoy was the first champion of the Super Touring regulations back in 1991. But incredibly, he was probably more famous for being tipped onto his roof in a Toyota by his teammate Julian Bailey here at Silverstone. He continued with BTCC through to 1998 as a full season. 1999 he only did a half season, taking over from someone else who hadn't had the best of seasons at that point in a Renault Laguna. And then he did a one-off round in 2000. Will was a multi-talented guy because not only was he a great racer, he was also a fully qualified chartered surveyor. So had that as a day job with the racing to go alongside it. In 2002, he was teaming up as like the sort of technical side for the commentary with Ben Edwards for ITV. And he'd also taken on like a team management driver coaching role with Honda in BTCC. Really sadly, late in 2002, he was diagnosed with a brain tumour and unfortunately died before the year was out. It was a great loss, and he was just 50 years old. Next up, I've got Alain Menu from that well-known motorsport country, Switzerland. Now, Alain was renowned as a very good touring car driver. He was the only driver of the Super Touring era to win the championship twice. He drove for BMW, for Renault and for Ford. 2001, he left the series at the end of 2000, so for 2001 he moved to Germany to race Opel Astras in the DTM series. He also dabbled a little bit with Le Mans. His real comeback came in 2005 through to 2012, where he drove for Chevrolet in the World Touring Car Championship with a best result of second in 2012. Since then, he's only done a bit of sporadic racing really. He did a bit of Porsche Super Cup in 2013. 2014, he did have a BTCC return with the VW Passat CC. Finished 11th in the championship, so wasn't overly spectacular. 2015, he stayed on as a driver coach, did enter the last round at Brands Hatch, but the results weren't particularly spectacular. And since then appears to have retired from the racing side of things. I really hope you've enjoyed that little look at what these drivers got up to after the BTCC. For us in the UK, this is where we really knew about these guys and we were hearing their names called out week in, week out. So I just thought it'd be interesting to see what they got up to next. Thank you, as ever, so much for watching.